It begins with the mechanical sound of the lock sliding into place. That specific, tactile moment where the world outside is physically severed from the world inside. You lean your back against the door, and for the first time in 10 hours, your diaphragm actually releases. It is not just relief. It is a physiological shifting of gears, a hard reset of a nervous system that has been vibrating at a frequency slightly too high for too long. You are alone, yet you are not alone. There is a presence in the room with you, a living, breathing consciousness that occupies space without consuming it. Contrast this with the hours you just spent. Every interaction with a person required a micro-calibration. You had to monitor your tone, adjust your facial expressions, anticipate the social rhythm, and constantly broadcast a version of yourself that was palatable to others. Being around humans is an act of continuous, low-grade performance. It requires a sustained output of cognitive energy just to maintain the baseline of acceptable. But here, in this quiet ecosystem you have built, that demand evaporates. The entity on the sofa or the windowsill might watch you, but it does not judge the performance. It does not require you to explain why you are tired. It does not need you to smile to prove you are listening. It offers a proximity that is absolute, but entirely non-invasive. You are permitted to simply exist. Most people describe this as merely liking animals. They reduce it to a hobby or a personality quirk. But you know that the sensation you feel right now, this sudden, heavy stillness in your chest, is not about affection. It is about regulation. And the reason this specific form of companionship feels safer than human connection is not because you are antisocial. It is because your brain has flagged human interaction as a metabolic expense you can no longer afford to pay. When you decline a social obligation to remain in this environment, or when you leave a gathering early because the noise has become abrasive, the external interpretation is almost always a character judgment. The labels are predictable: aloof, guarded, antisocial. In the cultural lexicon, the preference for this specific type of non-human companionship is frequently pathologized. It is viewed as a consolation prize for those who have failed at the complex game of human intimacy. They look at your life and see a withdrawal. They assume that given the choice between the dynamic unpredictability of a human conversation and the silent, static presence of a cat, the healthy choice is invariably the human one. If you consistently choose the latter, the assumption is that you are hiding. They interpret your need for this specific frequency of interaction as a symptom of anxiety or emotional stuntedness. They ask why you don't put yourself out there, implying that out there is the only coordinate where meaningful existence occurs. They even critique the relationship itself. Because the animal does not offer verbal affirmation or performative loyalty, they view it as one-sided. They project their own need for constant external validation onto you, wondering why you invest care in a creature that remains autonomous. They pity you, imagining a loneliness that you do not actually feel. But you let these labels stick. You allow them to think you are simply eccentric or socially awkward. There is a utility in their misunderstanding. If they believe you are merely a cat person, a caricature of solitude, they stop expecting you to explain yourself. They stop demanding access. However, their error is not just social, it is structural. They assume you are avoiding them because you dislike them. They do not realize that the calculation has nothing to do with affection and everything to do with price. You are not rejecting connection. You are instinctively protecting a bank of biological currency that is already running in the red. Humans emit a constant frequency of demand. Even in total silence, a human presence broadcasts needs, judgments, and potential interruptions. Your nervous system treats a human in the room as an active variable that must be continuously monitored. You are constantly running a background simulation. Are they bored? Are they judging the silence? Do they need something? Are they about to speak? This vigilance is microscopic, but it is relentless. It operates like an open application on a device that drains the battery even when the screen is off. Over weeks, months, and years, this accumulation of micro-vigilance creates a specific type of erosion. It is not the physical tiredness of labor. It is a sensory hollowing out. You find yourself becoming irritable, not because someone did something wrong, but simply because they are. The sound of a voice in the other room, the notification on a phone, the expectation of a response. These become physical irritants, like sandpaper on a sunburn. You begin to hoard solitude. You calculate exactly how much social time you can endure before you hit the wall. And when you hit that wall, it is not a gradual decline, it is a system failure. Your ability to empathize shuts down. Your face goes flat. You dissociate. You feel a desperate, visceral need to reduce the amount of input entering your brain. The cat, however, does not trigger this tax. When a cat enters the room, your background monitoring system remains dormant. Why? Because the cat is congruent. Its actions and its intent are perfectly aligned. If it wants food, it communicates hunger. If it wants sleep, it sleeps. If it wants distance, it leaves. There is no subtext to pass. There is no passive aggression to detect. There is no social performance to decode. You do not have to simulate the cat's mind to be safe around it. This lack of decoding allows your brain to stop processing and start recovering. The exhaustion you feel around people is not a moral failing or a lack of love. It is the result of running a high-intensity cognitive program on hardware that is structurally resistant to ambiguity. And this sensitivity to the human load is not a glitch. It is a sophisticated, if costly, method of threat management. To understand why the presence of a cat resets your baseline in a way that human presence cannot, we must look at the architecture of the brain's energy expenditure. The human brain is a prediction engine. It does not passively record the world. It actively constructs a model of what is about to happen to minimize surprise. This process, known as predictive coding, consumes a massive amount of metabolic energy. When you interact with another human, your brain is forced into a state of high-entropy prediction. Humans are volatile variables. They say one thing but mean another. Their micro-expressions might contradict their words. To navigate a conversation, your brain must run a continuous, high-speed simulation called theory of mind, the cognitive ability to attribute mental states, beliefs, and intents to others. You are constantly hall of mirroring. I think that you think that I am thinking this. This is an exhausting computational load. The cat bypasses this entirely. Neurologically, a cat presents a low-entropy social stimulus. While cats can be physically unpredictable, they are emotionally transparent. They do not utilize deceit, irony, or social masking. Because the cat lacks the capacity for complex judgment or social manipulation, your brain instinctively powers down the theory of mind network. You do not need to simulate the cat's perspective to ensure your social safety. This triggers a shift in the autonomic nervous system. When the demand to predict and perform is removed, the sympathetic nervous system, the driver of fight, flight, or fawn responses, cedes control to the parasympathetic nervous system. You enter a state of parallel co-regulation. This is a distinct biological phenomenon where the rhythmic presence of another living mammal regulates your heart rate and cortisol levels, but, and this is the critical distinction, without the attachment cost required by humans. You get the biological benefit of proximity, the oxytocin release, the tactile grounding, without the cognitive tax of negotiation. It is intimacy without the invasion of the self. However, Recognizing this mechanism raises a more difficult question. If this preference was simply a universal appreciation for low-energy interaction, everyone would prefer cats to humans. But they don't. Most people thrive on the friction of human complexity. So, why does your specific nervous system register human complexity not as a stimulant, but as a threat? You tell yourself that you simply prefer the quiet, that you are an introvert, that you are low maintenance. But this is a minimization. This is not a personality trait. It is a biological boundary. The preference for cats over humans is not about the animal. It is about the absence of the mask. When you are with humans, you are forced to fracture yourself. There is the you that you feel inside, and the you that you project outward to keep the peace. You smile when you are not happy. You nod when you are not listening. You suppress your irritation to avoid conflict. You are constantly betraying your own internal reality to maintain social cohesion. The cat requires no such betrayal. The cat does not care about your potential. It does not need you to be successful, charming, or good. It responds only to your immediate physical reality. If you are gentle, it approaches. If you are aggressive, it leaves. It is a mirror that reflects only what is actually there, not what should be there. Therefore, your alignment with this creature is not an act of adoration. It is an act of defiance against the human requirement to perform. You are seeking a relationship where you are allowed to be unified, where your internal state and your external behavior can finally match. But this safety comes with a sharp, uncomfortable edge. By validating your need for a relationship without performance, the cat inadvertently highlights the exhausting falseness of every other relationship you have. It makes the real world feel even more artificial. You begin to resent the mask, not because it is heavy, but because you now know what it feels like to take it off. The sanctuary defines the cage. Once you identify the relief you feel with the cat as a cessation of performance, you begin to see the inverse pattern imprinted on every other aspect of your life. The mechanism isn't isolated to your living room. It is the governing algorithm of your existence, and once you see it, you cannot unsee the friction it causes everywhere else. Consider your professional life. You likely gravitate toward roles or tasks that are objective, measurable, and solitary. You prefer the clean logic of a spreadsheet, code, or a physical craft over the nebulous political navigation of management. But the modern workplace does not allow you to simply do the work. It demands that you also perform the role of the good colleague. You sit in meetings where 90% of the dialogue is social signaling, people talking not to solve a problem, but to prove they are present. To them, this is relationship building. To you, it is a hemorrhage of time and energy. You feel a physical tightness in your chest as the meeting drags on, not because you are bored, but because you are witnessing a wildly inefficient system that demands your participation. You are forced to simulate interest in the ritual, knowing that if you simply stood up, stated the solution, and left, you would be punished, not for being wrong, but for breaking the social contract. The cat would just eat the food. The human demands you praise the chef, make eye contact while chewing, and discuss the texture of the plate. This pattern bleeds into your intimate relationships with even greater volatility. You are likely the partner who expresses love through acts of service or simple silent presence. You fix the leaking tap. You remember how they take their coffee. You sit in the same room with them for hours. In your internal translation, this is the highest form of intimacy. I am safe enough with you to stop performing. You are offering them the same gift the cat offers you, a space of zero demand. But the human partner often misreads this. They interpret your silence as distance. They read your lack of constant verbal affirmation as a lack of affection. They push for deeper connection, which to them means verbal processing, talking about feelings, analyzing the relationship, dissecting the dynamic. For you, this demand to verbalize the internal state destroys the internal state. By forcing you to drag your feelings into the light and explain them, they turn your sanctuary into another workplace. You feel cornered. You withdraw further to protect your energy, which they see as abandonment, causing them to push harder. You end up in a cycle where your attempt to create stability is the very thing that destabilizes the relationship. You want parallel play, they want intersecting entanglement. Even your digital existence reflects this survival strategy. Look at how you consume media. You likely prefer asynchronous communication, texts, emails, forums, where you can control the timing of your engagement. A phone call is an intrusion. It demands a synchronous, real-time performance that you cannot edit or pause. You might lurk on social media for hours, observing the chaos, but you rarely post. Why? Because posting invites comment. Comment requires response. Response initiates a loop of expectation. You instinctively avoid creating open loops with humans because you know that every loop is a leak in your energy tank. You curate your physical environment with the same ruthless precision. You are sensitive to harsh lighting, sudden noises, and chaotic textures. You create nests, controlled zones where the variables are known. When a guest comes over and moves a chair, or leaves a light on, or speaks too loudly, it feels like a violation of the ecosystem. It isn't just annoyance, it is a disruption of the homeostasis you have painstakingly built. You realize, finally, that the cat is not just a pet. It is a totem. It represents the only operating system in your life that is compatible with your own. You are trying to live a low-entropy life in a high-entropy world. And the friction you feel, the exhaustion, the irritation, the urge to cancel plans, is the heat generated by that incompatibility. You are a creature of efficiency, trapped in a species addicted to drama. This strategy of withdrawal, of aligning with the cat's silence over the human's noise, is effective. It works. It keeps your cortisol low and preserves your limited energy. But in biology, every successful adaptation incurs a metabolic debt elsewhere. The cost of this safety is not loneliness. The cost is fragility. When you consistently avoid the friction of human interaction, you are not just saving energy, you are letting a vital psychological muscle atrophy. Social resilience is not a fixed trait. It is a callus built through exposure. By curating a life that strictly avoids the high-entropy demands of people, you lower your threshold for what constitutes a crisis. 3 years ago, a loud dinner party might have been annoying. Today, it feels like a psychological assault. Your zone of tolerance is shrinking. You are becoming hyper-specialized for a quiet, controlled environment that exists nowhere outside your own home. The more you retreat into the predictable, safe dynamic of the cat, the more abrasive the unpredictable world becomes. You are creating a feedback loop. The world feels too loud, so you withdraw. Because you withdraw, you lose your tolerance for noise, so the world feels even louder. This creates a subtle but profound distortion in how you view opportunity. Human opportunity, romance, career advancement, new ideas, almost always arrives wrapped in the messy, inefficient package of social interaction. It comes through the small talk you despise. It comes through the awkward introductions you avoid. By filtering out the performance, you also filter out the serendipity. You are keeping the noise out, but you are also keeping the signal out. You end up in a state of stagnant stability. You are safe. You are regulated. You are not stressed, but you are also not moving. You are watching time pass from a fortress that has become a prison of your own design. And the deepest irony is that by rejecting the mask of social performance, you eventually lose the ability to wear it when you actually need it. The social fluidity required to navigate a crisis, to comfort a grieving friend, or to advocate for yourself in a conflict requires practice. If you only practice silence, when the moment comes that demands a roar or even a sentence, you may find your voice has rusted shut. You have successfully protected yourself from the chaos of being human, but in doing so, you have begun to remove yourself from the shared reality of your species. The cat on the windowsill shifts, stretches, and settles back into a perfect, self-contained circle. It is entirely complete. It needs nothing from the history of its species and worries nothing about its future. It simply is. You look at it, and you feel that familiar pull, the desire to merge with that simplicity, to just be. But you are not a cat. You possess a neocortex that burns with the need for meaning, a limbic system that craves complex connection, and a memory that demands continuity. You can mimic the cat's withdrawal, but you cannot mimic its contentment. The peace you find in isolation is always shadowed by the knowledge of what you are avoiding. You are left with a quiet, heavy equation that does not balance. On one side is the peace you require to survive. On the other is the friction you require to live. The world will tell you to come out of your shell. Your instincts will tell you to bolt the door tighter. Neither is the answer. Perhaps the goal is not to choose between the human and the animal. Perhaps the goal is to acknowledge that you are a hybrid creature, stranded between the need for tribe and the need for silence. You will always be tired by the performance. You will always be restored by the quiet. The lock on the door is not a mistake, but neither is the hand that reaches for it. You sit in the silence, listening to the breathing of the only creature in the room that understands you, and you realize you are waiting for something. You are waiting for the strength to stand up, open the door, and walk back into the noise, not because you want to, but because you know that eventually you must. Just not yet.